The hour of 7 o'clock having arrived, I'm going to call the council to order. Let the roll reflect that all council members are in attendance and a quorum has been established. Council, we have before us the minutes of the regular city council meeting of April 2nd, 2018. Any additions or corrections to the minutes of that meeting? Seeing none, they stand approved. Council items to be considered. Any council items to be considered? Melanie?
Your Honor and Council, before you tonight, under Community Development, the first item, resolution to consider an appeal of an administrative determination for an inpatient treatment facility at 620 Ramsey Street. Late this afternoon, we were notified that the applicant has withdrawn the appeal of that determination, so it would be appropriate for the council to strike that from the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, so there's an understanding, community development, number 1, resolution to consider the appeal of administrative determination for 620 Ramsey has been withdrawn, no longer on the agenda. Next item is consent agenda. Council, what's your wish? Councilmember Brox. Council Brox makes a motion to approve the consent agenda, seconded by Councilmember Fulch. That motion is now before the body. Is there any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye. 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 Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. We'll go to awarding of contracts and public hearing. The first tonight under that heading is a resolution to award a contract for the 2018 Neighborhood Infrastructure Improvements Project. Nick, welcome to the meeting. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, Mayor Hicks. Good evening, council members. As the mayor said, before you tonight is a resolution to consider award for our neighborhood reconstruction project contract for this year. Engineering department opened 4 bids about 3 weeks ago for this project, and we had some good competition in that, with the low bid being submitted by BCM of Faribault, $1.727 million. That's about $500,000 below what we estimated. And BCM is a contractor we've worked with in recent years. They did our 2014 neighborhood improvements project. We were very satisfied with their performance there, so no concerns from that end of things heading into this one. So again, the resolution would award the contract to BCM for $1,727,027.50. I'll turn it back to you, Mayor Hicks, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Nick, for that presentation. Council, well, first of all, council, I'm going to bring that to here. What's your wish? Councilmember Balsanic moves to accept, second by Councilmember Vaughn. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Next, we have award of contracts for the LeDuc roof at 1629 Vermillion Street. Justin, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Your Honor. Late last year, we had 2 bids for this project that weren't accepted due to cost and qualifications. We reposted the project on the city's website along with plan distribution websites and directly sending notices to 40 contractors in the area. We did have 5 firms that attended the mandatory bid meeting, and we received 2 bids on time. We did receive a third that was submitted after the bid opening, which was rejected. The 2 bids we received were from North Valley Construction out of Chatfield for $183,750, and Les Jones Roofing out of Bloomington for $409,430. The qualification review for North Valley Construction determined that their project team has installed several wood shingle roofs to include new ones, old ones, large ones, and steeped ones. They also have recent experience working with historic legacy grant documentation and prevailing wage requirements on historic rehabilitation project. The reference checks we did determined that the client's reference work were happy with their performance of the contractor. We do have a legacy grant awarded for up to $107,550 for the project, with half of the project needing to be matched by city funds. And staff is recommending council move forward with adopting the attached resolution, or the resolution for North Valley Construction for the project. Thank you.
Okay, council, this is before us. Discussion, Councilmember Balsanic.
Thank you, Your Honor. I can't remember the last time we had bids come in where the winning bid was less than half of what the second bid was. And I'm not alarmed because you just said that Norse, has a great track record. What was that third bid that came in after the fact? Was that?
That one was rejected. It wasn't, it wasn't, yeah.
Yeah, how much had they bid? Do you remember?
No, I don't have that information.
Okay. Okay, I mean, this is all for our good. I'll make a motion to approve the bid.
Councilmember Balsani makes a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Lightfeld. That motion is now before the body. Is there any further discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Okay, next we'll go to under community development. Number 2, resolution, special use permit request, the expansion of the funeral home in R2 zoning, Wise Funeral Home. Justin?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just give me 1 minute here.
That's okay.
Mute this. All right, the applicant is proposing to expand the parking lot over the site of a demolished house. And the existing building will also be expanded to about 400 square feet. Within the building addition, there will be a crematory. The December City Council passed ordinance amendment allowing funeral homes and crematoriums in the R2 medium density district. This consideration was at the request of Weiss Funeral Home, which had been planning for this expansion. Without this ordinance amendment, the addition and the parking lot expansion for the crematorium wouldn't be allowed to occur, as this would be expanding a non-conforming use. The existing drives are not proposed to change. The expanded parking lot will go from 23 spaces to 50 spaces. Additional parking stalls also exist in the front of the facility. With this expansion, the site will now meet all their on-street parking requirements without needing off-street spaces. This is a inset of the landscape and site plan. There's a lighting on site, and they're redoing the lighting plan to just make sure that there'll be no more lighting reaching the property lines than is allowed in a residential area. The landscaping plan shows additional trees planted around the site, along with shrubberies, or a row of shrubs along the Spring Street side. And the setbacks meet the ordinance requirements. 10 feet is required along a property line along a side street. And as you can see, they're proposing just over 10 feet. The design standards require that certain percentages of class 1 and 2 materials are used. Class 1 would be paint like a wood material. This house is currently a wood siding with stone wainscoting around the bottom side, which meets the ordinance requirements. And they're proposing to match that on the addition. This is the proposed addition for the crematory. And this is an existing picture of what that side of the building looks like. The addition will be on the right-hand side. They're proposing just to remove that one tree in the center there, and possibly another one, but they're going to try to save the tree. Approving a special use permit is a function of looking at a use that would be allowed in the district and would work well in the area, and looking at to see if special conditions are necessary to make sure that occurs. And there's several things we look at in those scenarios. One would be ingress, egress, and off-street parking. And much of the site has been previously operated without issue. Additional spaces are being made which would reduce the on-street parking requirements. Screening and buffering. This site is adding additional landscaping to the parking lot area to help screening. Lighting, we're assuring that through a photometric plan and required timer for street light, for the parking light, that there is no lighting nuisances, and compatibility with the surrounding area. The site has a fairly residential feel and appearance. And as far as the crematory goes, staff has researched crematories in residential areas and received feedback and witnessed very low to negligible impacts to the surrounding area. The noticeable effect that was witnessed is a low blower noise coming from the chimney and faint heat waves above that during operation. And no visible smoke from a properly operated crematory has been determined from our research and our visiting sites in the recent time. So with that, I can answer any questions of council.
Okay. Thank you for bringing this forward. Council, this issue is before us. What's your wish? Councilmember Vaughn. Motion to approve the special use permit at 400 Spring Street, seconded by Councilmember Balsanic. That motion is before us. Is there discussion to the motion? Discussion to the motion. Okay. Seeing council, I will caution you that this is a special use permit request. 6 out of 7 votes are required for it to be approved. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Next is the resolution on the site plan. Justin described the site plan. Let's go to that discussion. Discussion toward the site plan. Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. Justin, looking at the parking lot, I was wondering, how does the stormwater runoff work? Is it just basically cascading down into the water collection system for the city, or is there, I don't see any like on-site ponding areas or anything to that effect?
Correct. Since this expansion was less than 1 acre of disturbed area, they're not required to do any additional stormwater than previous existed on the site. I believe the stormwater is going to be handled similarly to how it was when the parking lot was exists today. I don't know exactly what that is. I'm not sure if it goes down the existing drives or if there's an outlet onto the street.
There's a connection to the storm sewer system that'll come off of the parking lot.
Okay. Councilmember Balsanic? Councilmember Balsanic makes a motion to approve. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Councilmember Fulch. Motion to, we have a motion before the body. Is there additional discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Okay, next we have the adoption of the Vermillion Street Corridor Plan. Morgan is here to give us that plan. Morgan, welcome to the meeting. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you, Mayor Hicks and council members. As you know, for the past 12 months, we've been working on the Vermillion Street Corridor study. The purpose of this study was to identify areas for economic growth and redevelopment along the Vermillion Street Corridor. And with the help of community members, business owners, and other key stakeholders, we've been able to put together a plan that not only looks to improve the market position of the corridor, but provides actionable implementation steps for us to do so. So tonight we are asking for authorization to adopt the Vermillion Street Corridor study. And Andrew from House Hill Levine, our consultant, is here to present the plan in further detail.
Welcome to the meeting. We're very glad to have you here. Nice to see you again.
It's nice to see you all as well, Mayor and council members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So as Morgan said, the purpose of the study is to improve the economic development environment on Vermillion Street. And there are a few ways in which one can do that. One is aesthetic improvements. The other is to work on improving the multimodal use of Vermillion Street, understanding that the automotive use will continue to be the primary use of the street, and also to improve the connections through wayfinding signage and otherwise to the other highlights and destinations in Hastings that you can get to from Vermillion Street. We decided to look at Vermillion Street not as a single corridor, but rather as being the main street of 4 different areas that vary according to topography and when those areas were developed, which is reflected in the size of buildings, how they're sited on the property, et cetera. And from north to south, you have what we're calling downtown, midtown, the Vermillion River District, and also Southtown. The downtown district we're showing as being north of 8th Street, midtown from 8th to just north of the LeDuc Historic Estate. Vermillion River, of course, the blocks on either side of the Vermillion River and where Vermillion Street crosses it. And Southtown, roughly south of the intersection of Vermillion and Red Wing Boulevard. Now, there's one thing that I forgot to mention to you. I believe you have a PDF of the study. Okay. So what I'm going to be doing is highlighting selections from the study. We're not going to be going through page by page. But of course, if you have any questions about something that I'm skipping, please bring it up. So we had, I believe, 13 opportunity sites. These opportunity sites are privately owned pieces of property or collections of property that were identified to us through discussion with you all, with city staff, with the Vermillion Street Advisory Coalition, and through one-on-one stakeholder interviews early on in the process. And one thing that we want to emphasize is that, well, two things. One is that though there are 13 sites, what we're proposing in the study is hopefully examples of what could be done in any number of different locations along Vermillion Street. And being listed as an opportunity site does not mean that the current ownership or the current use of that property is not welcome. In fact, just the opposite. We're trying to make Vermillion Street that is a better place to do business for everyone. The downtown district, and so in each of the districts, there's 2 or more opportunity sites, but we chose to focus on one or a portion of one of those opportunity sites as an example of what could be done in that district. The downtown district is the most, I'd say, distinct of the 4 districts. The other 3 districts, something you can do in Midtown, you probably would be able to do at the Vermillion River and the other way around. But downtown is special in several regards. One is that we're recommending that this is an area where you might particularly be interested in having mixed-use development, multi-level development of up to 4 stories, and that buildings be located at or very close to the property line, continuing the way buildings have been built along 2nd Street. A public investment in this area might have to do with improvements to the pedestrian network and also the addition of some sort of gateway, announcing to people, as if you're coming from the north across the bridge, that you've arrived in Hastings, that there's a fantastic downtown, for example, that you're driving over on the bridge. We're proposing that be at 4th Street or 3rd Street, but it should be somewhere just south of the bridge touchdown. The block that we chose to illustrate is the west side of Vermillion between 4th and 5th Streets. This is a view, if we were above City Hall right now looking towards the southwest, this is basically what we would see. We're proposing in this concept two distinct buildings, one 4-story and I believe one 3-story. But these are to illustrate a point. It isn't that you necessarily need to have two buildings or that they have to be one 3 and one 4-story, but that this is something that could be done. We're showing that the current alley be used and perhaps widened and be an outdoor space that taps into what would hopefully be more foot traffic on Vermillion Street. And the ground floor would be commercial, and we're thinking that the downtown in particular is a good area for upper level residential uses, which is what we're showing in the building that's to the right, that's right on that faces 4th Street. Were there any questions about that before I move on to Midtown?
Councilmember Balsanic?
Thank you, Your Honor. Andrew, nice to have you up here from Chicago. And
It's
that
nice to
you
see you
didn't
again.
your flight wasn't delayed, huh?
No, it was actually wonderful. I was telling Morgan it was very smooth.
Okay, good for you. And this, I know we're talking about specifically this example. Proposal here is 4 stories on the one structure. Does this require, do we have a height restriction in this area right now? Does anybody know?
Address that one, Councilman.
Sure.
The height restriction that we would have would be in the downtown core district, which would be more on 2nd Street. That'd be the height of the Finch building. This building here right now being zoned C3, I believe there's a height restriction on that one.
Okay. I'm just wondering because we do have City Hall kitty corner across the street from this, and I'm just a little concerned about blocking the view of our beautiful City Hall is all. Just kind of wondering if we would be better switching this. And again, I know this is, nothing is chiseled in stone here, but just kind of a footnote that we want to protect the sight line of our City Hall regarding that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the point. Yes.
Councilmember Folt?
I was just curious, for these site plans to work, it looks like it would require the procurement of an entire block for the majority of these plans. And I was wondering, what is the estimated value then of procuring an entire block and then leveling it and then rebuilding, I guess? So the first question would be, what would be the property value roughly, or have you not looked into that question? I was just curious, what kind of investment would it take to actually make something like this a reality?
That is something that we did not look into. We didn't look into land cost or development costs. What we did look at was what the market was, let's say, for retail and for housing. Would there be a demand for additional retail? We found that generally no, but that there would be a demand for more housing. So we looked at the market side, but we didn't look at the supply side, what it would cost to bring something like this to market.
Okay, fair enough, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew.
The Midtown District would vary a little bit from downtown in that while we're also calling for buildings to be built closer to the property line, we're not calling for them to be built at the property line. Perhaps it would be appropriate for some sort of setback. In this area, we think that slightly lower buildings, 3 floors, would be more appropriate and probably would fit what the market would demand. At a prior meeting, I mentioned that 2-story buildings are a little bit difficult for people to build, depending on what they are, because a second floor would often require an Americans with Disabilities Act compliance, perhaps investment in an elevator, and once you pay for an elevator, you might want to have a third or fourth level instead of just going to the second level. Also different from downtown, we have Todd Field here, which is an important community asset and is something that should be promoted, and hopefully any new development would address it, if not in the design. And I'll say what I mean about that in a moment. So the site that we chose to focus on is the shopping malls, the two that are located, or the ones that are located on the 3 blocks south of Highway 55, bordering Todd Field and to the south. And what you're seeing roughly here, and this is also a view from the northeast, the orientation is the same. So Todd Field would be off to the right. What I meant by addressing Todd Field is the small building or what looks like a small building in this view. To the far right shows a freestanding structure, a single story to the front, 2 stories to the back. They could have outdoor dining. I think that we can credit John with this as an idea. That this is something that perhaps during games people would want to be outside, but even when there isn't a game during the nice weather, you could have outdoor seating on the second level. The difference between today, what you see at this location, and what we're proposing is a little bit higher density. We're looking at 2 and 3 story buildings and some single story buildings, so it's a mix as opposed to, right now we have 1 and 2 story buildings. This would be 1, 2, and 3 story buildings. We're also proposing the 13th Street be brought, I'm assuming it existed at one point to Vermillion Street, that we reopen it to Vermillion Street, and that based on feedback that we got from you at a prior meeting, we've broken up the block so that there's a little bit more of a connection between Vermillion Street and the parking in the back, so it isn't a full block street frontage. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Volsan?
Thank you, Your Honor. For the sake of my constituents who live along Eddy, between Highway 55 and actually, 14th Street, this is very nice, and residents along there, I've had concerns from them about Eddy Street kind of almost being an alley with all of the commercial traffic, deliveries and so on and so forth coming up and down Eddy Street. And looking at this, it really softens the east side of Eddy and removes anything commercial, to just off of Vermillion Street on the west side there. So I'm very pleased about this. I think this really solves a problem that we've had with residences all up and down Eddy Street on the west side. But and then just a quick question for our city planner, John. Everything on Eddy is zoned, on the west side is zoned residential. We don't have any mixed use or anything else in there. There'd have to be some zoning changes then if the west side of Eddy was going to be incorporated and allow for either multi-residential or continued commercial. So as it sits right now, this is very pleasing, and I think my constituents would be very happy with this. Thank you.
Thank you. The Vermillion River is one of the things that really struck me about Hastings and the Vermillion Corridor in particular. It seems like something that should very much be highlighted, and at first it seemed a little counterintuitive, especially with the mills right there. And of course it makes sense that the mills are by the river, but we think that this is an opportunity to do a residential development that takes advantage of the river, the views of the river, but more, perhaps more importantly, the connection to the trail system. So the site that we looked at was I believe the site that's currently, it's still owned by Quick Trip, right? And it was to have been the location of Quick Trip. But this is a very different take on it, which is instead of having Quick Trip, you would have mixed use, primarily residential, with the commercial supporting the residential use. This wouldn't necessarily be commercial as a destination. This would be more for the people, let's say, who are working at the mill, coming across the street. There's a convenience store for the residents of the building, something like that. There would be, we think, an opportunity for perhaps a restaurant or something right on the frontage that faces the river. I realize that you don't see the river right from there, but it's closest to the river. And here we're showing an amenity deck on the top floor. I know our warm season in the upper Midwest isn't so long, but maybe there could be a pool up there. Are there any questions about this concept?
Councilmember Vaughn?
Thanks, Andrew. Just a follow-up comment that I had heard since last time we met. Someone still made a comment as a resident that I wouldn't want to sleep that close to 30,000 cars a day. So their recommendation was that this concept be pushed back with the parking lot in the front, just to put a buffer in there at all. But that was just a comment from a resident.
Councilmember Brox?
I know we've talked about this before. I wondered if you could speak to the idea of moving the buildings closer to the property line. Just what advantages does that provide? You know, why is that a major element? Because I think it seems kind of trendy, but is that trend going to stand the test of time over the next 30 years? And why have we incorporated that here? I just think you gave an explanation at our workshop, and I just think it'd be good for everybody to hear.
Okay, and I appreciate the question because I think it's something that I probably should have explained at the very beginning. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is a little bit of a, we'll have a little transportation discussion. You have the 30,000 cars on Vermillion Street, and those 30,000 motorists and their passengers are potential residents, customers, people who will make Hastings an even more prosperous community. There are a few problems, though. You have to get them out of their cars. You have to have them be able to see something that's attractive, that's eye-catching. You have to have them drive at a speed where they can stop at a business. And I had a very nice discussion once again. I've forgotten the gentleman's name from Minnesota DOT. And we were talking about the speed at which drivers can comfortably turn into a business or turn off the road, regardless of for whatever reason it is. And that's not the speed at which people are moving right now on Vermillion Street. I know that there's been a discussion about the posted speed limit, and the rationale that not just Minnesota DOT, but that a lot of DOTs have is we don't want to post a speed limit that has no relationship to how the street is designed. I'm now paraphrasing reading that I've done. This has nothing to do with the staff person that I spoke with. What I mean is you have wide lanes, you have gentle curves, you have a flat surface. The road is telling you 70. So we don't want to have a sign that says 30. So right now you have people driving 45, right? And that sign's posted at 35. Maybe people in the middle of the night when the traffic's lower are driving 50 or 60, right? So you have to you have to create some cues to the driver that now's the time to drive a little more slowly. It's not enough to have the sign. You can do it through lane narrowing. I think right now the lanes are about 12 feet. You could paint 10. That's pretty aggressive, but you can do it. You can have trees, and this is where the buildings come in. One of the complaints I've heard about Napa is I can't see around the corner. But that's the point. The point is you should slow down at the corner before you turn, right? And so once you have buildings like Napa or like the buildings that exist here in these few blocks, before you start going up the hill, it's yet another indication to the motorist to slow down a little bit. So you won't need to have those speed limit signs. People will start driving more slowly. And you want that because even though it may take a minute or two longer to get through town, it makes it that much easier to do business on Vermillion Street. So that's the answer I'd give. Yeah.
Councilmember Balsanic?
Thank you, Your Honor. The object with me in terms of Vermillion Street is to calm the traffic down. By keeping the buildings closer to Vermillion, I've talked to experts who have said that will inherently slow the traffic down. So and then narrowing the lanes, that's something that I got from experts as well. Additional plantings, trees and so forth, things like that. So I think there are some tricks that we can do that will cover that. Now the other thing is we're talking about, there's been mention of the 30,000 plus cars a day up and down that corridor. I'm not so sure that we're at 30,000 right now in that section of Vermillion Street because traffic is turning onto 55, 15th Street, and so forth, 19th Street, on down the line. Someday, of course, if we're looking at this whole grand scheme, we'll probably be up, close to 30,000 or so. So that's going to kind of breathe in and out as I see it there. Now, Councilmember Vaughn had suggested putting the buildings in back and the parking lots in front in that location. I think that's a problem. One of the reasons Quick Trip did not want to, or was not going to build on the corner of County 47 and Vermillion is the curb cuts that MnDOT and the county were prohibiting in terms of getting in and getting out. Now, looking at this plan here, I think we're a lot better off and a little more congenial with MnDOT and the county if we keep the buildings in the front and move our entrances and exits, to the back of those properties. And again, with the river, with the falls, I'm not sure you can see the falls from these buildings in the future, but it does get you a little closer to looking at the river from those locations if the buildings are closer to the streets than if they were further away from the streets. So my inclination would be to go with this arrangement. And again, just personally, I just have a problem with parking lots in front of buildings. Our former Target space with all of the parking in front doesn't really do much for the aesthetics. Walmart, the Coburn's shopping center over there, it just doesn't do an awful lot for the aesthetics of the whole thing. So I think keeping the building in the forefront, that's the important thing, really, not so much the parking, and keep the parking in back because that's pretty much unattractive to me. Thank you.
Okay, I want to chime in a little bit on that because in general, I do agree and I do think it's better to have the buildings right up on Vermillion Street. But council, we had this opportunity and we didn't take it. And that's the CVS building, right? Staff correctly suggested what CVS wanted to do and they didn't want to do, right? Well, it was put the CVS right on Vermillion Street and put the parking in the back. Well, we didn't do that. Why didn't we do that? Well, the reason why we didn't do it is because we had a neighborhood that was very upset about having a parking lot and what that brings to their neighborhood, the lighting, the traffic. And they wanted the building set back because they felt that the building served as a buffer. So, so when we had Vermillion Street Plan 1, it was adopted in 2008 or whatever, and staff correctly interpreted that and put that building in the front and told CVS that's where it's going to be. After much discussion we had with the neighborhood, they said, we're not against CVS, but we want the building in the back because the building serves as a buffer. I don't know, Andrew, if you have any any statements about that. I generally agree that the buildings on the street is better. I think it looks better aesthetically. I think it does serve as a better noise barrier for the neighborhood once it's on top of that traffic. And then they have to deal with the parking lot in the back. Perhaps if CVS had come forward and had a fantastic plan that shielded somewhat that parking lot to the neighborhood, saying, well, we're going to have this beautiful lines of trees and we're going to have this separation, whatever it would have been, maybe it could have sold better. But I think in the future, if we're going to implement this plan, then we're going to have to make sure that developers really take care of, as you described, Councilmember Balsanic, on that Eddy Street, that's a very smooth-looking transition that folks would be able to feel that they can live next to. Andrew, would you like to chime on that at all, or chime in on that?
One of the things that we've been showing in the illustrations is a landscaped barrier between the parking and the adjacent street. We think that that's very important because there's few things sadder than an empty parking lot. It's not going to be full most of the time. It would be nice to have some greenery. And so after one of our last meetings, based on the council members' comments the last time, we removed some parking from the concept in Midtown, in part in order to make room for landscaping, and I think that that's key. I believe the CVS, we don't have to have a lengthy CVS discussion, but isn't there parking on both sides?
They do have parking in the front.
And the back?
Off front and the side, but not in the back. The back is a drive-through.
Okay.
For their pharmacy.
Okay.
So, Councilmember Balsanic?
Well, I remember that discussion, and I don't know that it was so much the neighbors as it was CVS with its corporate model. They said, this is the way we build them. And and I said to them, we've got a plan here, we spent time, we spent money on it, and you're gonna, show up here and break this thing apart. And what I recall is that it kind of boiled down to whether or not MnDOT was going to give them a curb cut to enter off of Vermillion into their parking lot, and somehow, God, I still to this day don't understand how MnDOT gave them the approval for that curb cut, but when they got that curb cut, boom, the building went in the back. Now, this is something that, you will be wrestling with, we will be wrestling with. You get a developer that comes in and says, well, I don't like it this way, and I want to see it a different way. And how do we keep the reins on them so that they stay with this? I don't know if you can offer any examples or any recommendations on, how you prevent. I guess I don't see another CVS coming into this location, but you get a developer that comes in and says, well, I think we can maximize our investment here if we do it this way. How do we stop them?
Councilmember Vaughn?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to make the point, what Councilmember Bosonic's talking about is, and I'd asked this during Hedgerow too, is a plan is a plan. I mean, there's a reason that these buildings have a lot of parking lots in front. It's an economic tool. That's what they want. They're all asking for that parking lot. If we mentioned all the Targets, the Walmarts, they all do it. But this is an economic plan for us. That's kind of our driving part of doing the Vermillion Street Corridor Plan was economic. So I just use caution that this is a plan, and I like the word wrestle because we will wrestle with, I just don't want, that's why I always ask, is there an end date to a plan, or is there some, there's gotta be some flexibility to this plan, because if a developer says, good idea, but I'm gonna put them in the back, we need to listen to their justification versus just saying, this is what we want, if not, don't come in here, because I think it's gonna handcuff us.
Further discussion at this point? Okay, Andrew, we'll let you try to get through. Maybe what we could do is try to hold our questions to the end, that we can move forward. Because we're almost there.
Yes, this is true. We have the Southtown District. And it looks like this area, and from discussions, it sounds like this area was intended to be regional shopping district, and it looks like it has had a certain level of success, but that really hasn't caught on. And the concept that we have here is a little bit of a continuation of the residential district that's immediately to the south, with commercial uses limited to Red Wing Boulevard and Vermillion Street, because as was previously pointed out, the 30,000 number is not consistent along Vermillion Street. By the time you get south of Red Wing Boulevard, the remaining traffic is about 2/3 on Red Wing. I think it's about 14,000 on Red Wing and 7,000 on Vermillion, which is very different than Vermillion and Highway 55. Oh, and as a side note, this is probably the single most important public investment, not necessarily Hastings, probably the state, I'm assuming. But we think a roundabout would be appropriate at that intersection, and also be able to double as a place for, while you're already inside the city limits, a place that really announces that now you're in Hastings in some manner. In this view, we're looking roughly from the west, across Vermillion, towards Red Wing. And I'm sorry, the lighting is not great. I'm assuming that on your screens or in your printouts you're seeing this a little better, but what we're proposing is row houses, attached single-family homes in the middle blocks, and on the south of 33rd Street, you'd have multifamily residential, but then you'd have almost more traditional single-story commercial development along Vermillion. It's a bit of a tricky location because of the diagonal, and so we were wondering exactly how to orient the building. But this is a plan, it's a concept. As has been pointed out, a developer is going to come and make a proposal that's not exactly this, but this shows the general idea. Commercial at the peripheries, residential on the interior. We think that with the addition of more people, that perhaps the businesses that are there and perhaps future businesses would do a little better. Then this brings us to the last major point, which is not any of the districts, and that this is not economic development, but it's related to economic development, and it goes back to the discussion we had about the speed on the street. So Vermillion Street has multiple roles. It's a transportation corridor. It's also a commercial corridor. It's also, as people have said, it's the public face of Hastings to many people who have never set foot in the city. So economic development also sometimes involves questions of transportation and aesthetics. The top cross-section shows a atypical section of Vermillion. Of course, it's not like this at every location. In some places, the planting strip is narrower, the sidewalks are narrower, the lanes might be wider. But what we're proposing is that the lanes be narrowed to 10 feet. You could do that during the next grinding and restriping of the street at a relatively low cost, and also ultimately a widening of the median in order to, and it's in order to have a minimum 6-foot pedestrian refuge at the intersections. There's a question about where you want pedestrians to cross. Is it every block? Is it at signalized intersections only? But at a minimum, there should be, since people are, I believe in Minnesota, legally allowed to cross at every intersection, you should at least give people the opportunity to do so. And there was, I forgot who asked this question during one of our meetings. It was, do you actually increase the chance of harm when you put in a striped crosswalk? I forgot who asked me that at this moment. And I looked into that question. And the question is, yes, if all you do is stripe an intersection, you may have more crashes between motor vehicles and pedestrians. That's not something that anyone wants. However, if you put in a refuge, that helps with the crosswalk, and then if you do certain other things as well, it helps as well. So that's why we're showing the refuge that gives you the possibility of improving any given intersection as you like in the future. And the reason I mentioned Red Wing is Red Wing is a city where the 10-foot lanes are already in use. So it's something that MnDOT should be willing to accept. And they're actually the ones who brought it to my attention. So the implementation section is about 10 pages long, but there were certain points that I wanted to highlight in it. Realizing that some things cost a lot of money and require working with a lot of different partners, and other things can be done relatively inexpensively and relatively quickly. I think it is important to have some things quickly that you can point to buck up your courage to take on more difficult tasks. So one of the things I'm highlighting of the many implementation steps that you could take is that if you agree with the vision of the study, that it's something that you promote, that you say, these are the kinds of things we'd like to see in Hastings. And I'm assuming that some developers will be excited to see that, because I think a lot of developers assume that a lot of communities will just want to see single-story commercial development and that's it. But if you're interested in mixed use and something a little taller, that might pique someone's interest. So a relatively inexpensive thing that you can do is start promoting the vision of what you would like development to be. Update you're working on the comprehensive plan right now. Have it be consistent with the study. Have your zoning, building regulations all work in concert. Reduce curb cuts. That's sort of a side thing. And then, and I know that this is something that's a little difficult, building maintenance. It's sometimes tough to go to a a building owner who may have relatively low rental income coming in and saying you're in violation. But you also have to make the street look worth investing in. And that's where the vision comes back. I think it helps to say this is the vision we have for the street, and it's going to require a certain amount of investment from the state, the city, but also the private property owners. We had a lot of complaints about the sack and whack fees, and I understand that there are programs that are available at the city and metropolitan level to help people with those costs. That should definitely be marketed. People should be aware that that ought not to be the kind of impediment that people think it is. And honestly, it's a complaint that I heard early on, but not recently. So perhaps the word is getting out, which is good. I would promote connections to Hastings' strengths, and I've only listed some of them. Both rivers, LeDuc Historic Estate, the downtown. When I first came to Hastings, I didn't know there was 2nd Street, a part. I thought that Vermillion Street was the main street of town. I didn't realize that there was a historic main street that preceded Vermillion Street. And it's great. And so there's got to be some way to connect it. Do you want to have banners along Vermillion Street saying, you know, this is what you can see in this area? I mean, not be so obvious, but maybe at the Vermillion River, the LeDuc Estate, or the falls itself is an image that's somehow replicated, somewhat inexpensively, but it's repeated, so people see it in their mind when they're gone. And then I would work with MnDOT on the restriping of the street, and also in the longer run, work on the Red Wing Boulevard intersection, and also Highway 55, and also 47, but it's definitely Red Wing Boulevard. And I believe that's it for the presentation.
Thank you for that presentation, Andrew.
Thank you.
Is there further questions? Any other questions? Well, I'm very happy that we're at this point. I think this is a goal that we've wanted to do here in the city for a long time. I know I've been involved thinking about this, and it's great to go forward with a plan. And I appreciate all the names that were on here of everyone who participated on the Vermillion Street Advisory Coalition. There are many stakeholders on Vermillion Street that are involved in this, as well as citizens from around the community, and council members and staff. This plan wasn't built in a vacuum. There was a lot of input and a lot of discussion about it, and so I appreciate having this before us. I liked a lot of the ideas in here. I think Councilmember Vaughn is correct to suggest that this is a working document. But if we can agree on the major points that we feel that could help our community, then we ought to pursue that quite feverishly here in the future. One of the things I think when we look at Vermillion Street, MnDOT probably doesn't have that really on its plans to redo until maybe another 10 years. We're probably another decade out. But I think that whatever we can do to promote Vermillion Street, in fact, as part of its transportation mode, whatever we can do to help beautify that area. In the meantime, whatever projects that might come forward that would lend us an opportunity to do that, we should do it. And then when MnDOT comes here in 10 years and says, well, we're going to redo this street, we could say, well, good, it's time, and actually we have an idea for you to pursue. And in fact, I wouldn't even wait for that. I'd probably, once we adopt this plan, take our transportation plans and give them to MnDOT now and file them and say, this is what we want in the future. So when you're gonna come down here and you're gonna redo Vermillion Street, they have an idea of what we're thinking about. So I think that's something we should do quickly once this plan's adopted. Is there any other discussion? Councilmember Fulch?
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree with what you just said. And I would really like to see there be a working committee on how to implement some of the vision for the things that the city actually can control about the aesthetics. For instance, I absolutely love, thank you very much for placing a couple pages in here about how the road could look different with removing the Cobra lights and putting in new, more aesthetically pleasing lights and trees. And then furthermore, dealing with some of, the blight along, in the sidewalks and in the medians and such. I had gone to one of the open house meetings, and I was really shocked as to how many folks felt pretty strongly about just the look and feel of Vermillion Street, how not the businesses themselves necessarily, but rather, within, the roadway itself, how things had deteriorated and how it could use a little spiffying up. And so I would love it if we didn't lose, momentum, that we didn't just say, awesome job, great plan, and put it on a shelf, and that we just promote it, to businesses who are interested, rather that we make it a working plan, and that, and maybe this next year, we come up with what our action steps are going to be, and then we can begin to prioritize with budgeting and such as well.
I agree, and, we do have some properties along here that we can promote this vision, particularly the one on 47 and 61. I like the ideas that are in here, that are incorporated in here about that corner, and that's how we should do it. I know Morgan's been thinking about that. We ought to promote that to any developer out there. Here's our vision, and here's a property you can have that become reality. And I really like the statement of the plan in here to promote that end of it and that economic development aspect of it, and we must do that. Councilmember Brock?
I agree with you, Mayor, and I also like the way that this breaks it down into neighborhoods, because I think if you can develop the character of a couple mile long stretch is very difficult, but when you break it down into 4 neighborhoods with distinct characteristics, and I think at least I see the need for housing in Hastings, because we need to grow and we need more places for people to live. And so I like that the residential is a main aspect to this, and also that there's commercial on the first level. So the idea of having commercial that serves the residents that are near, I think all of that kind of breaking it into neighborhoods, I find it very, very exciting, and I hope we can promote it. And I just want to thank the committee and all the people who worked on it, because I think it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of it take next steps and come to fruition.
Okay, I think we're becoming fully informed. Council, we need a motion to adopt the plan. Councilmember Brock makes that motion to adopt, second by Councilmember Balsanic. Is there any further discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate all your work.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to work in town. I'll miss it.
Come back and visit. Spend some more money.
Thank you, I will.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Okay, Council, next under administration, we have norms and guidelines. Melanie?
Your Honor and Council, thank you. Earlier this year, the Council, along with our senior management team, held a 2-day retreat, or 2 sessions, and it was focused on team building, effective governance issues, and just how to work better and continue to work well as a team. There were 4 priorities that came out of those sessions that we are working on. One is looking through our committee and workshop structure and checking in on that to see how the council chooses to make decisions. One is reviewing our community vision using our comprehensive plan. A third item is updating our strategic plan. And the last item is to adopt some council rules of procedure and decorum. This is not something that we've had in the past, but it's not an unusual document for bodies to use. Broadly, what it does is they include base norms for interacting with council members, staff, volunteers. And norms like these like I said, they're not uncommon. They allow a body to develop a framework, some common language for expectations. And so we are bringing this forward to the council. Our senior management team has had an opportunity to review it and provide their comment as well. We worked from a template provided by our facilitator. So happy to stand for any questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, council, this issue is before us. Any discussion? Discussion? Pretty clear cut. Councilmember Bolsanic, did you want to make a comment?
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. Just to say that we are an island in the storm. When I read accounts of other cities and some of the chicanery and so forth that goes on at those meetings, I've been on the council going on 10 years, and it has really been a pleasure to come to the meetings. I've never said to myself, oh my God, I've got a council meeting, and gnash my teeth and, you know, wonder what's going to happen. I think it is, it's just amazing that we have had historically such great rapport. This model pretty much just rubber stamps what we have been doing, and I look forward to working with it, and I'm sure everybody else does.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Is there any, did staff want a motion on this to adopt this?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Councilmember Lund makes a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Fulch. The motion is before us. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Next, we have the discussion on the Vermillion Linear Park, Phase 2 restoration. Our distinguished Park and Rec Director is here this evening. Chris, welcome to the meeting. Very glad to have you here.
I could have done that. Sorry about that. Now I have to say that all over again?
Just a short synopsis, that's
Yeah.
all.
So we're looking to continue and get into phase 2. So we have Mr. Alex Roth here tonight. He is an ecologist with the Friends of the Mississippi River to explain part of what's happened in phase 1, also some work that's happened in Old Mill Park, and what the plans are for phase 2. So ultimately, again, looking for approval for phase 2 work, and turn it over to Alex here.
Mr. Roth, welcome to our council meeting. We're very glad to have you here. I just want to tell you that we're very appreciative of the work from the Friends of the Mississippi River. That is one heck of an organization. It's an organization that's dedicated to the quality of the Mississippi River and waters or bodies in and around that river, including the Vermillion. And I think I speak on behalf of a lot of folks that appreciate the work that the Friends of the Mississippi River are doing. It doesn't always have to take a governmental entity to be involved in important environmental work. And the Friends of the Mississippi River are certainly that. So welcome to the meeting. We're glad to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all for having me, council members, and thank you, Chris, for the introduction. You basically did my entire introduction, so that's excellent. It sounds like most folks are familiar with FMR. We are a Twin Cities nonprofit. We work on protecting, restoring, enhancing the Mississippi River and its watershed in the Twin Cities metro area. So we don't own any land. We work with partners. Those partners can be private landowners, corporate landowners, cities, counties, the DNR, other state agencies. We work with all of the above. And we've been a longtime partner with the City of Hastings, and it's been one of our favorite and sort of most fruitful partnerships in terms of accomplishments. So I'm just going to give a quick background walkthrough of our work to date at both Old Mill and Vermillion Linear Park, and then I'll talk a little bit about our proposed Phase 2 restoration at Vermillion Linear Park and some other future endeavors. So at Old Mill Park, I'm sure most folks are familiar with the park. As Chris said, we started working with the city in 2012 by funding a natural resource management plan for the park. These are big documents that take into account historical conditions, pre-European settlement conditions at the park, get out to the property and do surveys, vegetation, wildlife, soil, water, all those types of surveys, and create a plan for both ecological restoration and maintenance of those parklands. And so the biggest and most important thing that an NRMP does is it allows FMR to then go pursue state funding sources to fund that restoration. And so by having a resource management plan in place, in 2012 we were able to acquire about $21,500 from the legislature to begin restoration at Old Mill Park. We've since added some additional funding to that, $6,700 just the other year, and our Phase 1 at Old Mill Park will actually come to an end this June. And so just to give a quick background of the park and the areas we work in, we've created 3 new acres of prairie at the park. We've been managing 4 acres of existing prairie and savanna and 3 acres of woodland. And hopefully I'll be showing some nice photos here. So hopefully they'll show up on the screen, but also if you have them on your tablets and devices, that works as well. So the image on the left is sort of the before conditions of the woodlands at Old Mill Park, chock full of invasive shrubs and other invasive plants like buckthorn and honeysuckle. I'm sure most folks know these are pretty detrimental plants in terms of their effects on water quality, effects on wildlife, and effects on native plant diversity. So our first big task was to remove the invasive plant material from the site. The image on the right is the after shot of that, where we've created a nice open woodland. We did some supplemental seeding and planting of native species into that woodland as well to create better habitat for wildlife. In our savanna restoration, and I should mention that savanna you can essentially think of as prairie grasses and wildflowers sort of punctuated by large open-grown oak trees. So the photo on the left was our sort of pre-prep stage. The savanna was pretty well dominated by non-native plant species, some very invasive plant species. We were able to remove all those, prep the site, and then seed the site with a pretty diverse mix of native prairie grasses and wildflowers, basically not only for general beautification of the park, but to create really great pollinator, bird, and wildlife habitat. So the photo on the right is what this site looked like in 2016. And then I mentioned we did create 3 acres of prairie at the park. We actually took what was previously turf grass, an area that was had to be mowed by city staff, and we created 3 acres of diverse prairie by seeding and planting wildflowers and grasses there, basically improving the aesthetic beauty of the entrance of the park for visitors, as well as improving that habitat again. So I should mention that FMR doesn't just stop at restoring the habitat. We think it's vitally important to connect people to that habitat as well. And we do that in part by involving citizens and students and community members in our restoration process. And so in Hastings, we've had a long time standing partnership with the Hastings High School biology class. Many of you probably know Joe Beatty. We've worked with him on our restoration sites, actually teaching his students about ecological restoration in the classroom and then bringing them out to put those lessons learned into practice on our sites. At Old Mill Park, they learned about benefits of plant diversity and actually created a demonstration garden of the native plant species that you find at the site that's sitting right there by the parking lot to engage visitors as they show up to the site. So I should mention too that we do get to do some pretty neat things in terms of ecological restoration. So the historical disturbance regime of these habitats was fire. Fire used to run through prairie and savanna pretty frequently, low intensity ground fires that help maintain these prairies as open habitats. So we are able to use prescribed fire with trained crews to manage both these woodland and prairie areas. And we've also found that at Old Mill Park in particular, there's a pretty large population of a state-threatened plant species out there, which we've been able to expand and maintain through our restoration work. So we have a monitoring program out there to monitor this population of kittentails, which sounds like a pretty cute little plant. But I'm going to move on to Vermillion Linear Park, which is sort of the gist of the presentation here. I'll give a similar update on where we are to date and then present the phase 2 work that we're proposing. So back in 2012, we were able to write and fund the natural resource management plan for the park. In 2014, we were able to take that to the state legislature and get a $40,000 grant for restoration of our phase 1 area. And that project started or really got off the ground in 2015. And just like at Old Mill Park, we'll end that phase in 2018 here in June. So here's sort of our restoration phases map of the park. Phase 1 is that blue zone with the arrow there. It's about 15 acres right along the Vermillion River. Our phase 2 and subsequent phases you can see in other colors there, and I'll get to those in a minute. But focusing on the phase 1, much like Old Mill Park, our woodlands there were pretty heavily degraded by invasive plant species, chock full of buckthorn and honeysuckle. Really impedes and inhibits recreation, it impedes wildlife using the site, and it decreases overall plant diversity at the site. So we were able to get all of that material out. We were able to replace that with native shrubs and trees to help regenerate the forest. You can see the photo on the right. You notice the open woodland in the back. You can see the river there, and that's just an example of one of the trees and shrubs that we've planted into the park. Our prairie restoration is sort of the crown jewel at Vermillion Linear Park. This is the majority of what the habitat type was previously at the park before European settlement. You can see in the before shot, it's mostly just mowed grasses, not necessarily turf grass, but actually made up of a few invasive grass species that city staff had to mow periodically throughout the growing year. We were able to take that out of a mowing rotation, restore it by burning off the non-native species, planting a diverse mix, about 35 native grasses and wildflowers, and now it's blooms throughout the season, habitat for pollinators, birds, and other wildlife. So I just wanted to sort of drive that point home for everybody by showing this image. This is currently, this past season, what areas of the park looked like. And on the left side, you sort of see this unrestored area, which is periodically mowed. It's invasive smooth brome. It's a grass that's pretty short-rooted, meaning that it doesn't grow roots down far into the soil. It doesn't hold soil well, doesn't prevent erosion very well, doesn't offer any flowers, any wildflowers, blooms throughout the season, so no real good pollinator or wildlife habitat. And really, it's generally low aesthetic beauty unless you're very into just grass, which some people may be. But on the right is what we've transitioned our phase 1 zone to, which again is blooms throughout the season, about 35 different native plant species out there. Deep root systems, these prairie grasses can grow 6 to 8 feet or more deep into the ground. They stabilize soil, they create healthy soil. We've got habitat for pollinators, birds, and wildlife throughout the season. So these are just a couple photos of what we saw this past summer out at the site. We've got bumblebees and other native pollinators on bergamot on the right, yellow coneflower on the left, ironweed in the middle. So it's a pretty special place now, and it's a pretty beautiful place to walk through and visit. Again, we've been working with Joe Beatty's Hastings High School class at this site since 2014. They, again, are able to really take those lessons that we participate in the classroom and then apply them out in the field. The last 2 years, they focused mostly on invasive species removal and native species planting. So they're out there planting grasses, wildflowers, shrubs, and trees into these restoration areas. And this year, we're actually starting a pollinator monitoring program. Now that the prairie is up and running, these students will be out there collecting data on the number and different species and kinds of pollinators that are out using the site so that we can track how effective our restoration's being at creating this healthy habitat. So FMR is a place-based organization. We really make it a point to stay with the sites that we embark on in terms of restoration. We don't just sort of take that initial grant, restore it, and then step back. In many cases, we do have capable partners who could do that, but we do appreciate maintaining our involvement in these sites. So we do have long-term maintenance plans built into these natural resource management plans that we write. And for Vermillion Linear Park, we estimate that it comes out to just under about $2,000 a year to maintain these areas we've restored. That's, spot treatment of new invasive species that come in, prescribed burns on a 2 to 5 year rotation. And as we expand these restored areas, the maintenance of any one area becomes less as we're buffering that habitat with more and more high quality habitat. So as we continue to expand and restore this, those cost estimates will actually even come down. I did just throw in a cost estimate slide for Old Mill Park. That natural resource management plan calls for some additional tree thinning out there to create oak savanna densities that are more replicate of historical densities. So that's why that estimate is about $1,000 a year higher or so, roughly $3,000 a year to maintain Old Mill Park as it is restored. But as I talked about expanding, we have been pursuing, along with Parks and Rec staff, the idea of expanding to our Phase 2 restoration at Vermillion Linear Park. That would create another 7.3 acres of restored habitat. And we were actually just able to obtain a $30,000 grant from the Conservation Partners Legacy Grant Program, to which the city did provide a $3,000 match, which was very appreciated. We would plan to start that restoration this year, late spring if that comes, or right into summer, whenever that arrives. And that work would be completed by June of 2020. At that point, we can think about expanding even more. So we do have future phases out at the site, specifically phase 3 and 4, which we've received approval from the Army Corps of Engineers to restore that grassland spillway to native prairie again. That would create about 30 acres of new, really high quality habitat. So we'd really be kind of starting to exponentially expand the amount of restored habitat out there. We estimate that would cost roughly $120,000, figuring about $4,000 per acre of restoration. And that's money that we would hope to bring again to this process through state and federal grant sources, many of which require some sort of landowner match. But we're really excited to continue the restoration here and hope to stay involved. So I just wanted to say I'd be remiss if I didn't plug the work that Chris and his staff do. City of Hastings has been a great partner. Whenever we've needed any help with a volunteer event, getting the community out there, they're always ready and willing to help us and go above and beyond what many of our partners do. So we've been really lucky to have the city as a partner. It was great to hear that you value us as much as we value you. So we hope to continue this partnership as long as we can. And I have my contact information up there for anyone who wants to reach out with any questions, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have now.
Thank you, Alex, for that fine presentation. Appreciate it. It's valuable work that's going on here. Council, this issue is before us. Is there any questions or discussion? Okay. Motion is required for phase 2. Councilmember Brox makes that motion, seconded by Councilmember Liefeld. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, council members.
Okay, next is comments from the audience. Comments from the audience. Are there any comments this evening from the audience? Any comments? Okay. If not, council announcements? Is there one? Oh, please. Do you want to make a comment? Dusty, come right to the podium and for the record, your name and address. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. Dusty Green, and I live on 1 East 27th Street, or the house that you pass by probably all the time when you're on 61. And I just wanted to say thank you for everyone that did work on the corridor study. It's very important, I think, and like was mentioned before, it's pretty exciting. So hopefully something comes of it. One thing I did want to mention, just that was mentioned, was the economic benefits of it, that it could be provided. And One of the things that was also mentioned was the placement of the buildings, et cetera. And what I see is one of the things that kind of is missed is that adding residents to Highway 61 makes a massive economic impact that we currently don't have. A lot of these sites that we were discussed are either vacant or they're commercial only. And so if you add this residential factor, massive amounts of economic benefits, along with aesthetic and other benefits, but on the economic side, massive economic benefits could occur. So excited about it, and just hopefully we see something happen. So.
Well, thank you for your testimony, and I'll just let everyone know here that Dusty sent me a list of a great bunch of ideas about Vermillion Street, and I have that list, and I'll share it with them.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Okay, anyone else would like to speak? Okay, if not, council, announcements? Are there any announcements? If not, I have a few. First of all, on Monday, April 23rd at noon, the Administrative Committee, chaired by Councilmember Brox with Councilmembers Fulch and Lund, will meet to discuss issues related to special events. This will be a conference call for committee members, but it's open to the public and will be held in the volunteer room at City Hall. Later that evening at 7 p.m. on Monday, April 23rd, is the Planning Commission meeting. On Tuesday, April 24th at 7:45 a.m., the Finance Committee will be meeting with Chair Councilmember Vaughn with Councilmembers Balsanic and Brox. They will meet to discuss a request by the Downtown Business Association regarding the planters downtown, and I know some members of the Downtown Business Association will be there as well. At 6 p.m. on that same day, on Tuesday, April 24th, is the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. And then on Monday, May 7th, maybe spring will actually start by then. Monday, May 7th, we might have a day above 35 degrees. At 7 p.m. that day is our next regular city council meeting. So that's, we have no further business before the city council. Councilmember Liefeld?
Thank you, Your Honor. I was going to give you the chance before I stole your thunder. So I do want to remind the community that on Sunday, April 29th,
please,
from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at the high school commons area, there will be an All Are Welcome event, joint effort between the City of Hastings, the school district, and community members to really show our diversity and to really step up and show how we are inclusive, and we'd like to welcome everybody to attend. If anyone has any questions, I know there's some Facebook pages out there for it. I'm sure they can contact the city as well if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely, Councilmember Liefeld. Thank you. Mark Zuzik, Hastings Middle School Principal, we have an event on our Facebook page, and we're happy to answer questions.
And we'd love to see you there.
Thank you, Councilmember, for that reminder. That's a very important meeting on April 29th, Sunday, at the high school commons area from 6 to 7:30. And to get you there, we're going to have ice cream there. So ice cream will be there. It'll be an ice cream social. But it's a really important discussion about our community, about being more inclusive, about being more welcoming, understanding that we are a diverse and becoming even more diverse here in Hastings. And we want to have a very important discussion as a community about that. And this is just the beginning of those discussions. And so I appreciate Councilmember Liefeld reminding all of us of that meeting. It's very important. So I hope to see everyone there on Sunday, April 29th. Councilmember Balsanic.
Oh, thank you. Somebody dropped out of this one in St. Paul, so I will be attending that one. Imagine me putting in mileage to go up the mountain.
Okay.
Could almost fly it.
All right. Thank you for that announcement. Councilmember, we have no other business before our body.
don't know. We have one more announcement, Your Honor.
I think I know what you're gonna
Yeah,
say.
you know what this is. You don't get off the hook. Mayor Hicks has a birthday coming up on a very important day, April 28th, so the day before our event, but happy birthday to Mayor Hicks on April 28th.
You know, to celebrate, we're gonna have a thing called Hootenanny. So I think that's a perfect
There you
birthday
go.
gift.
There
So
you
I
go.
think I'll take advantage of that. Councilmember Vaughn, did you have your hand up? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay. Maybe the council ought to get together and have a band and play at the Hootenanny someday. Maybe that might be a good idea. Huh? That'd be kind of fun. Huh? Okay, I might put Councilmember Lund in charge of that, maybe. We'll see how that works. Okay. Motion to adjourn is now in order. Councilmember Liefeld makes that motion, second by Councilmember Lund. That is a non-debatable motion. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails, and we are adjourned. Thank you.